Okay, excellent. So welcome everybody to Fernando Carneiro's Capstone defense on how and to what extent the dominant coalition members' values and perceptions impact public relations participation in organizational strategic management. I'm Mark John Stewart, instructor of strategic management in the program, and I'm chairing Capstone defense today. We also have Fernando's supervisor, Dr. Terry Flynn, and second reader, Dr. Alex Seveny, and friends and supporters in the gallery as well. Welcome sitting in on the presentation. So Fernando, you're coming in a long line of excellent MCM capstones, but also have done excellent work in the program thus far. So really looking forward to your presentation today. So just to recap our process, Fernando will have 25 minutes to present his capstone, after which we will open the floor for questions, and we have an order. So Terry, as supervisor, will have the first opportunity to ask questions, then over to Alex, the second reader, myself, if desired, as chair. And if we have time, we will either do another round of questions from the committee, or it may invite the gallery to ask some questions as well. After that point, we'll put everybody in who is not on the committee or Fernando into a breakout room while we discuss and debate the results. And then we will invite everybody and Fernando back to announce the outcome of the capstone defense today. So again, really looking forward to your presentation, Fernando. 25 minutes. I will mark our time as 9:35 and hand things over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mark. And good morning, everybody else. Thank you for being here for my defense. My capstone is on how and to what extent do dominant coalition members' values and perceptions impact public relations participation in organizational strategic management. And, at times, when appropriate, I will use the laser pointer feature. So today I want to tell you a story in 7 parts, from the introduction all the way to a look ahead of where we're going next in this effort to better understand the senior managers that we all work with and their relationship with public relations. Public relations scholars and practitioners are increasingly calling for communicators to be involved in the highest levels of decision-making. There are good reasons for that, because when public relations practitioners are involved, they contribute to organizational efficiency, to increased profits, societal good, and they support the organization's social license to operate. It feels like a no-brainer, but a survey of senior communicators in Canada, the US, and 4 other countries found that fewer than 40% of respondents play an active role in organizational strategic planning, and only 13% said they play a key role in defining the overall business strategy. Why is that? To answer that question, we need to look at the gatekeepers. Organizations do what they do because their most powerful people decide to do it that way. In other words, there's a group at the top, and individuals are either at the table as part of that group, or they're not setting the organization's strategy. This group includes the C-suite, headed by the CEO, and informal power players, usually lower down in the organization, and they may be internal or external to the organization. And together, these elite strategists are known as the dominant coalition. This is relevant to public relations practitioners because this powerful group chooses their peers at the dominant coalition table. Public relations has been in the dominant coalition since at least the 1920s, when Arthur Page negotiated a seat at the decision-making table at AT&T. He became the first vice president of public relations. It's been a long time, so why are dominant coalition members not inviting more public relations practitioners to join them? Well, research in the US by Christopher Wilson at Brigham Young University found that the values and perceptions of dominant coalition members influence whether they invite or not public relations to participate in the highest levels of decision-making. Wilson studied 2 values. The first is openness to the environment, which is defined as requiring information about the operational environment so the organization can adapt, and organizational autonomy, which is defined as the freedom to pursue self-determined plans and purposes with as few internal and external constraints. Wilson also explored perceptions of dominant coalition members through the lens of upper echelons theory, which proposes that organizational decisions, including the selection of peers at the decision-making table, are influenced by the background of dominant coalition members. This can include their education, experiences, cognitive abilities, personality, and so many other factors. I also feel it's important to say that it was Wilson's work that led me to the current study. The research problem. Dominant coalition members choose who they want as their peers. Their reasons are not well understood and insufficiently explored. Most previous research focused on the skills and abilities public relations practitioners need to develop before they can work at that highest level. But is that enough to receive an invitation? Well, as an answer, practitioners in the US have Wilson's study as a way to better understand it. Practitioners in Canada now have this study. The current study has 3 sets of data. The literature review looked at public relations research and industry articles. The second set of data is the results of the anonymous questionnaire, which was completed by 102 dominant coalition members in Canada. And the third set are the in-depth interviews with 10 dominant coalition members in Canada. Together, the results provide answers to the 3 research questions. So participants. Non-probability sampling was used because it was not possible to draw a random sample of the population. Dominant coalition members across Canada and for-profit, government, and non-profit organizations were targeted. And then of the 102 completed questionnaires, 54 were completed by members of the C-suite, 35 work in education, 59 are women, 40 men, 1 non-binary, 39 were in their positions longer than 5 years. The in-depth interviews were with dominant coalition members from Ontario and Quebec, representing 2 nonprofit organizations, 3 government, 3 public institutions, and 2 organizations in the private sector. That sets the scenario. Let's get to the results and discussion. So research question 1 examined organizational openness to the environment. So responses to the online survey, values of organizational openness scale, suggested that dominant coalition members who participated do value information from their operating environment. As you can see here, the mean was 4.2 out of 5, and there was a relatively high level of agreement among the respondents. And then of the 10 items in the scale, innovating and experimenting to cope with changes in the organization operating environment, that was the highest ranking item. And then the lowest ranking was appointing task forces. In fact, during the in-depth interviews, no one mentioned appointing task forces, and only the 3 folks who worked in government even talked about work groups. Now let's look at the 2 arrows, the green arrow and the maroon arrow. The maroon arrow points to the second lowest scoring item, which is supporting the community by providing help where needed. But the second highest scoring is demonstrating responsibility for the organization's impact on its stakeholders. So this suggests that the dominant coalition members who responded value showing that their organizations are making a difference. And the in-depth interviews add some context, which we'll explore in a couple of slides. So let's look at the highest scored item and what these senior leaders had to say in the in-depth interviews. The first CEO speaks of continually adapting. The CEO said, 10 years from now, we may decide to buy different equipment and be a different company. The second CEO talks about being responsive to the current zeitgeist. We adapt on a regular basis, the CEO said. And the chief strategy and communications officer of a municipality speaks of working with communicators to develop a model of strategic foresight. But it's very important for me to highlight that generally speaking, during the in-depth interviews, environmental scanning was seen as everyone's job. It was not exclusive to communications. Let's look at the second highest scoring item. The in-depth interviews provided context as well. So when it comes to demonstrating responsibility for the organization's impact on stakeholders, the CEO of a public institution said, community support is tied to government funding. The more they understand our value, the greater the propensity to fund us. The executive director of a nonprofit said, our funding is related to convincing supporters we can deliver the services they need. This is in contrast to the second lowest scoring item, which is supporting the community by providing help where needed, which again suggests these organizations need the community to survive. So it's important for them to show their value. Let's look at research question number 2, which focused on organizational autonomy. The participating dominant coalition members placed a high value on organizational autonomy. The mean was over 4, as you can see. And again, high level of agreement. They placed the highest value in the item. The organization is free to make decisions about its goals. That's the green circle here. And given that participants noted during the interviews that the degree of autonomy is tied to working with stakeholders, it makes sense that the lowest ranked item, the maroon circle here, is stakeholders expect the organization to use its own discretion in establishing policies. It feels like these senior managers believe stakeholders want a say in how things go. Interestingly, this is the same item that had the lowest mean when Wilson collected answers to the same set of questions in the United States. And then importantly, respondents to the online survey indicated that the second most valued item is the organization has the authority to determine its own mission. Sorry, it's the green arrow over here. And what that means is respondents value choosing what the organization will do more than they value choosing how it will do it. So substantive autonomy over procedural autonomy. So let's look at the highest. Let's look at the highest scoring item. The organization is free to make decisions about its goals. The in-depth interviews provided insight into why this is valued. The executive director of a nonprofit said, most of my time is very much dedicated to working with our union. That's because a positive relationship with labor means internal buy-in for a specific course of action. Director in a municipality said, even city councilors can be armchair experts on subjects like snow clearing when we have snow guys who do it every day. They're better at determining the best way to do it. But autonomy is not for every leader. Operating without any constraints? No, I don't think that's going to work for us, the CEO of a nonprofit said. When I asked the CEO to explain what they meant, the CEO added that more external autonomy was not desired because government regulations help build confidence that donations are being administered properly. Let's explore substantive autonomy, setting your own mission and goals. The president of a public institution said we place the highest value on autonomy. We need to show our ability to function and to make good decisions. The VP of a public institution said, sometimes we are at the whim of politicians making what could be considered politically expedient decisions as opposed to sound public policy. But there are benefits to being a member of the pack, and the CEO of a private organization said, when there is a problem, it's not our problem, it's the industry's problem. Before we get to the third research question, I want to share with you the level of confidence that these dominant coalition members showed in their knowledge of their PR, or said they had in their knowledge of their PR departments. 95 out of the 102 respondents to the survey said they are very familiar or somewhat familiar with the workings, capabilities, and contributions of their PR departments. With that context, research question number 3 looked at dominant coalition members' perceptions of PR to act as strategists. At the overview level, participating dominant coalition members rated public relations practitioners slightly higher when it came to their potential as managers than they did when it came to having the public relations department participate in organizational decision-making. And the first scale up here, when it came to working as managers, survey respondents rated the practitioner's greatest potential as being able to develop strategies for solving public relations problems. Not a surprise, but so close behind them, 0.01 behind them, was manage the organization's response to issues. I feel that's very important. And we'll get to that in a couple of slides. And then scoring lowest, close to the scale's midpoint, is public relations ability to conduct evaluation research. In the second scale, about participation in organizational decision-making, survey respondents rated the public relations department highest for the ability to participate in major initiatives, but lowest for general operations. So that needs context, and we'll get to that in the next couple of slides. Let's look at issues management first. The president of a public institution said, when you have an issue or a crisis, the communications arm of the institution becomes critically important. The VP of a private organization said, COVID caused the biggest changes to our workforce. We had to move forward in a digital manner much more quickly than planned. And a director working in a municipality said, when they threat a hunger strike, the 3 people who led the response were the city manager, the person who leads services for the homeless, and the communications director. So this is confirmation that leaders do look to public relations when there are issues or a crisis. Said I'd provide context about general operations versus major initiatives and public relations. So this slide contrasts general operations, which is day-to-day, with major initiatives, which are ranked lowest and highest. So thinking about general operations, the executive director of a nonprofit said, so he is basically the person who communicates what decisions we have made, but he is not involved in those decisions himself. Okay, what if there's a major initiative? Same executive director said, we have a 10-year reform plan. I see that public relations role growing in the future. How about the CEO of a public institution? General operations. They're usually there somewhat as a service to the other areas of the organization. That's what that CEO said of communicators. Look what happens when there's a major initiative. We had the Canadian rights to major initiative. It made a lot of sense to bring in someone who could write a communications plan. It's one of 2 situations where I would do that: crisis or a major opportunity. I took out the exact major opportunity to retain the anonymity. So the study leads to 5 main conclusions. Dominant coalition members see participation in strategic decision-making as earned. 2, perception of public relations practitioners as able to act as strategists is the strongest predictor of public relations participation in organizational strategic management. This finding confirms the findings of the US study by Wilson in 2016. 3, the current study reinforces the notion proposed by upper echelons theory that senior managers' experiences shape their perceptions, which go on to influence their future decisions, including on who to invite to join the dominant coalition. 4, organizational openness to the environment and organizational autonomy are valued by dominant coalition members, particularly those in organizations that operate as open systems. These values are positively associated with public relations participation in organizational decision-making. 5, successfully practicing issues management and leading major initiatives increase the degree to which dominant coalition members are more likely to view public relations participation in strategic management positively. Contributions to practice, better understanding of dominant coalition members as gatekeepers, information to help practitioners looking for career advancement. The direct involvement by dominant coalition members adds to the body of knowledge. This study increases the reach and refines findings related to upper echelons theory. This is the first study in Canada to explore dominant coalition members in association with public relations directly. And it provides paths for public relations practitioners to contribute toward organizational decision-making. It's important to note there are limitations to the study. It used a non-probability sample, so we don't know if the findings are applicable to the general population. Snowball sampling was used, so this may result in like-minded respondents and over-representation in one sector. Survey didn't ask respondents for their geographical locations, so we don't know if this is a true cross-Canada representation. But I'll tell you, invitations were sent to dominant coalition members in every province and territory. There were 35 respondents in education. This is a unique sector known for valuing autonomy. And the average CEO tenure in Canada is about 3 years. And given that dominant coalitions, by their very nature, they're continually changing, this leaves a lot of room for individuals with different values and perspectives to take over those roles. Future opportunities. The results of this study show there's knowledge to be gained by future research on dominant coalition members and their relationship with public relations. This would include testing values in addition to openness to the environment and autonomy. The inclusion of dominant coalition members with formal power in future studies would provide a better understanding of the big picture. Segmenting dominant coalition members by sector would allow for contrasting. One area not explored sufficiently in the current research is referent power, as in being a friend or colleague with dominant coalition members. And the high value placed on organizational openness to the environment suggests that the dominant coalition members who participated likely did so because they are open to sharing information. So future research using a random sample would address this issue. So thank you for listening, and I'm now looking forward to hearing your questions.
Excellent. Well presented, Fernando, and a couple of minutes to spare, right on time. So up first for questions and commentary is your supervisor, Dr. Terry Flynn.
And Terry, just before you ask, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can see everyone a little better, if that's okay.
Sure. Excellent. Well, congratulations. That was an excellent presentation. Very timely. Brazilian efficiency. Amazing. Amazing how on time, right? It started and ended on time. I think, you know, this shows the example of being able to take other research that has already been done in our body of knowledge and then really focus on Canadian. We are still far behind other countries in terms of gathering this empirical evidence in what we've done. So well done on that. Talk to me about the bias within the sample. I mean, yes, we're using snowball. Yes, your last point is very well taken, that, you know, it's likely those that perceive the value of openness and engagement are more likely going to participate in this kind of research than those that don't. But one of the other areas that is interesting is that the majority of organizations that you've talked to, participated, were publicly funded organizations. How does that impact your findings?
It limits the extent the results apply to the greater population, or the confidence we have that the results apply to the greater population. In the in-depth interviews, for example, the two individuals from private organizations, they stood out a little bit in that they valued, their values are a little bit different. I think that the bias of the public institutions is that they have a responsibility to be transparent. They spoke about that, whereas the representatives of private organizations didn't seem to put that same emphasis on being transparent. At the same time, the representatives from public institutions, from government, they valued showing what they were doing, the benefits of what they were doing, and they valued showing that they were serving the public. Whereas the individuals from private organizations spoke more about their value to their stakeholders, to shareholders, even to their employees, but not so much as the public.
So can you just compare and contrast your population, those that answered your survey and participated in your in-depth, to Wilson's population as well? How similar or dissimilar are the sample populations?
Wilson approached individuals at a limited number of organizations, and most participants came from within those organizations. So I believe he had something around, I think he had like 9 organizations, and then he distributed the 211 questionnaires. He got back, I think it was 118 usable responses, or sorry, usable questionnaire responses, but they represented only those 9 organizations that were willing to participate. Mm-hmm. So this research is more, it's broader, and it's Canadian. Mm-hmm. In an attempt to make it a true cross-Canada representation, I started in PEI many days, or in on the Vancouver Island many days, and I worked my way across the country and sending out survey invitations. That was not the approach in the US study. It was pretty much, what are organizations that are likely to participate? Of those, the ones that said yes, then multiple individuals from within those organizations responded to the questionnaires.
You know, this research and the work that Wilson has done, and other academics who are gathering empirical research, and to truly understand how strategic communications can not just be perceived to be valuable, but can demonstrate value to dominant coalitions, usually sit in very unread paywall journals that get a handful of people. How do we demonstrate? How do we bridge that gap between practice and research, so that in fact the work that you've done and Chris has done, and to really help dominant coalition members understand the value of these kind of initiatives?
I think that's super important related to this research. It's something I've thought about a lot, because it's close to my heart, and I think it should be to others. We're all looking for opportunities for growth in our careers. We're all looking for career advancement, and we're all asking ourselves, where should I work? Where can I contribute? And that is the approach that needs to be taken for this research to be palatable for the general public, for the general member of the dominant coalition, for practitioners. It needs to be looked at as something that gives you control over your career if you're a practitioner, because you can work on your skills. You can develop your strategic abilities. You can take the MCM and then go to work somewhere where the values of the dominant coalition members and their perceptions of PR are not going to lead to an invitation to join the dominant coalition. So putting it in the context of this will help you take control of your career. On the flip side of that, for dominant coalition members, the idea of how you make decisions, or of understanding how you make decisions through upper echelons theory and how that relates to public relations, hopefully leads to dominant coalition members learning more about how they make decisions, how they interact with public relations, so that they can make better informed choices of how they can work with public relations, because PR can add benefits to the organization, from increased profits to societal good. So you approach it from that lens.
Okay, thanks. That's enough for my first round. Thank you. Alex?
Yeah. So thank you for that presentation, Fernando. It was really good and a very interesting topic because it's, as Terry said, it's kind of understudied in Canada. I had a couple of sort of technical questions. My first one was around the results. So it's interesting. The results are they bunch a lot, right? Like everybody seems to have the same opinion about almost everything. When I looked at the data, and I was wondering what you make of that. Like why do they all seem to agree on everything?
So the questions that Terry asked about bias lead well into this.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the respondents, 35 of them out of 102, came from education. I imagine their values are somewhat similar. A lot of respondents probably came from organizations that value openness to the environment. This was not a random sample. So that bias is very likely influencing those results. And I believe that's why we saw that clustering. It was also a 5-point scale, 1 to 5. If you're choosing a 4, a 5, which people chose a lot in openness to the environment and organizational autonomy, or 3 to 4, which people chose more when it came to their perceptions of PR, there were clusters, and I believe that's why there were clusters.
Okay, thank you for that. That's a good explanation, and I appreciate that. So my next question would be, what does that tell us about the findings, right? Like,
So what does that tell you about
the findings, right? So what are, basically my question is, what are the findings then? What are they telling a defensible, statistically significant story about?
So of the representation suggests that for many dominant coalition members, these two values are something that they care about. They are values for them, openness to the environment and autonomy. And how to get there, how to help your organizations achieve, support those values is also part of this research. Much of it uncovered during the in-depth interviews. Paths like issues management, paths like supporting major initiatives. When it comes to the perceptions of senior managers, there's a lot of room to further explore that, but we do know that their view of public relations participation in organizational strategic management is a little bit lower than our ability to serve as managers.
Okay, I got it. And just a final follow-up to this, because this is kind of the thread that I had in my head as I was reading the paper, which is actually very well written, by the way, and well argued. So I kind of restate the same question again. So for whom is this valid? Are these findings valid? Right. So you mentioned it's a limited sample, and if you were to say these findings are valid for X population, or represent or if you wanted to tell me as a fellow social scientist, I feel these findings I'm confident these findings are representative of X population.
Alex, I think I'm confident these findings are representative of senior managers and organizations that have the public as a first priority.
In public organizations, or you mean, is that what you mean? Or
that have a customer focus or a public focus.
Okay, so not just not-for-profits or government or education.
Not just not-for-profits or government, but organizations that have a customer focus, organizations that rely on putting the customer's needs and satisfaction at the forefront of their activities and decisions.
Okay, great. All right, thank you very much.
Excellent. Thanks, Alex. And I'll take the chair's privilege to ask a question myself as well. Fernando, I think I appreciate that your capstone focuses on a topic which is tightly related to one of our main theses or priorities in this program, which is elevating the capabilities and positioning of PR and communications professionals in general, but in particular on a strategic level, because that's the level that's looking at the big picture of situations. And obviously, that's a passion of mine, strategic management. So I really liked that bent. And I found it interesting. You had some comments, which I think you interpolated from your data and your interviews around this notion that reputation for being able to contribute at that level has to be earned. Right. And I think that is a statement which we could apply to anybody in general. You've got to earn your positioning. But I think there was a takeaway there that perhaps in some other positions, it may need to be earned less. Maybe it has to be earned less by a CFO because by virtue of having gotten there, they're expected that they are able to play at that level. So I think to kind of drive this to maybe any insights or takeaways for audience in terms of their own professional careers, do you have any kind of summary advice on that earning process? And also, why do you think that is the case? Like, why is a CCO in that position of having earned their stripes, so to speak, before they can contribute to strategic level opinions and discourse, as opposed to maybe some other professionals?
Mark, thank you. The study points to a couple of different paths for earning it, such as successfully managing issues, successfully managing major initiatives. And why is it important for senior leaders to see that? Sorry, could you repeat the second part of the question?
Yeah, I think what's interesting to me is, what is your observations on why in particular senior communications professionals have to earn that right versus some other roles that may be kind of given that right by virtue of what they are, like a CFO, let's say, or a COO.
So Mark, one of the questions during the in-depth interviews is, do you think that at times communicators are hired more for tactical than strategic purposes? And they all said yes. We hire many communicators for tactical purposes. We need someone who can write. We need someone who can do social media. And you tend to get hired as a communicator when you first start out your career for tactical purposes. And then as you progress, as you learn, you start becoming more strategically, you start working more strategically, and that gets noticed. A lot of CEOs only have exposure to those tactical initiatives, so they don't know what a public relations practitioner can do, so that when you do get involved with something that allows, as a public relations practitioner, when you do get involved with something that allows you to be strategic, like issues management, that gets noticed and you start earning it. It's important to be successful. In a previous research paper, we looked at what happens when you're not successful, and that really lowers your standing. But understanding and showing that you can work strategically in addition to being tactical is how you earn it. And sometimes the boundaries you have for strategic work are very tight or non-existent.
Yeah, and I appreciate that perspective. And it's never a bad thing to earn your place, because usually when you've earned it, it's much more concrete than if you're given it. So thank you for that, Fernando. I think we have time for one more question, so I'll offer that opportunity to Terry or Alex first before going to the gallery.
Thanks, Mark. So what was your biggest disappointment in your findings?
I think that the biggest disappointment came from how many senior managers during the in-depth interviews thought of public relations first as note takers and writers, and maybe strategists second. I feel like I know public relations practitioners who are really eager to do more, who can do more, and they're restrained. And I feel that it would benefit organizations and practitioners for them to have wider boundaries. So we have a lot of work to do as a practice.
Right, thank you.
Excellent, thanks, Fernando. And I think it's an excellent sentiment to close on. So at this point, I think, Terry, we will send everybody to a breakout room, and Alex, Terry, and I will remain here to discuss the outcome of the defense. Well done,
Right.
Fernando.